Welcome to Inside the London Knowledge Exchange, podcast where global education meets real-world innovation. Today's guest is Ken Valledy, a former brand director for AB InBev, turned into startup ecosystem champion. Co-founder of Progressive, Ken helps global brands collaborate with startups to drive innovation, and he is passionate about helping young people building meaningful, self-directed careers. In this episode, we explore how universities, can better prepare students for realities of entrepreneurships, innovation, and global work. Hi, Ken. Welcome. Thank you for being
Well,
with
thank you
us.
very much. My pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity.
This is a simple 6-question challenge. We'll try to keep it short, but if anything you'd like to add on and spread out the message, feel free to add on. So our first challenge is about bridging theory and practice. And Ken, you worked both sides of the world, biggest corporations and now startup world, helping others to make that leap. From your perspective, are graduates today really ready to apply what they've learned? Or do they really struggle to translate theory into that real world business thinking? Your take, please.
Yeah, well, I wonder if it's changed from the days when I graduated because I'm all for academia. I went through it myself, and I would definitely condone people to go through education. I think it definitely improves you as a person and improves your chances of getting a good career. However, there's always that gap, and I think there's always been that gap between theory and application, and I think that still applies today. I know there are quite a few courses out there where they have what I had, a gap year, a sandwich course where you had 1 year where you work for a company as part of your course, and I think that was invaluable. But if you don't have that, and it's say a 3 year degree or whatever the qualification may be, I think there is a challenge when you come out about applying that knowledge. And I think there's many ways you can get around it. I think universities maybe could lean more into outside and make more partnerships and connections with maybe companies or ecosystems, startup ecosystems in my case. But I still think that gap exists. I think there's a danger that you come out, and I did, you come out with a qualification, you think the business world's quite black and white, you apply certain models to it and things get fixed because that's how it works in the case studies you studied. And then you go into the real world and realize that one, unfortunately, things aren't that clean and clear. And also you have the added challenge of people, and there'll be people there who maybe for whatever reasons, logical, illogical, do not agree with your view. And because maybe you're new, you haven't got so much sway. So it can be a little bit unfulfilling, can be very disappointing, I think, for graduates, first of all, to come into the business world, especially the business world, because there is a danger you think you have the answers and you think you can help, but that doesn't always mean you can, and what you say will be implemented. So there is a gap, there is a bridge still to be crossed. And I don't
Yes.
know if it's not better.
Yes, it's that's why we try to converse with everyone to see if there is sort of the equilibrium that can be found. Do you think this could be a question I don't think you have an answer for, but do you think there's an experience or environments do you think students can be helped with to make that leap more, with a bit more
Yeah,
confidence?
as I say, I think some universities, I'd imagine, are trying to build those partnerships with outside companies. As I mentioned, placement years. There's maybe internships. There could be many ways that that gap or those two worlds can be joined more. If for and you want more, I would suggest to students, the world's quite an open place now to go along to events or should we say panels or get-togethers that could be of interest to you in the future, and go to those events. So, for example, if you wanted a career in engineering, go along to an engineering event in London or a city near you, and see what people are talking about and meet people. It's really important to get away, however much value it adds, get away from the textbooks, and dare I say the university environment, and go and meet people in your future working environment. So, yeah, take the bull by the horns, go to some events, go to some networking events, and meet some people that you never know may help you get a job, or may be part of your future ecosystem when you go into the working world. So there's nothing stopping people now being curious and going to events and saying, hey, I'm still a student, but I'm thinking of getting into this area. No one's going to say get out. If anything, they'd be very impressed that you make that proactive step.
Yes, yes. This is interesting because we've spoken to many employers, many of them startups, and they do seem to be a common trend. At least there's a rhyming in the way that they describe, what have you
Yeah.
done on your own? What have you been out there? And our previous speaker, Michael Korn, who runs, Blue Garage for engineers in Lewisham, and it pretty much sort of resonates with what you said about like, just come and meet us. We've got a hub for engineers. And most of them don't know it. You're standing out of the crowd. This is a very saturated graduate market, isn't it? That's basically my next question to you. Is like, you meet young professionals, right? With some of them with international experience, and what makes them stand out to you? Does the global exposure makes more adaptable, sorry, or innovative in a way, or for them, or your take?
I do. I believe it does. I think, as you say, it's a very crowded graduate market now. And I think you need something to stand out. And if that something is your global exposure, maybe you've worked in different countries, you've lived in different countries, you've met different people, more diverse groups of people. I think that is absolutely an advantage when it comes to selling yourself. I think it's the softer side as much as the work skills you learn from that exposure that can get you ahead. And I think if you're sitting and you're say into the last 5 of a job and you're in the last round and you've worked in different countries or you've lived in different countries or you've volunteered in different countries, that unique perspective you have from the normal person who's maybe just stayed close to home or in one country, I think gives you a great advantage. I mean, obviously it depends how suited you are to the job, but it definitely isn't a hindrance. I think it's definitely an advantage, more exposure you've had. I firmly believe that the more things you've tried, the more places you've lived, the more curious you are, the more risk-free you are. I think the more innovative you are because you see a bigger picture. I think if you stay close to home, maybe too much, I think you can have quite a closed-in view. Not saying that's wrong, but I think it's quite good as early as you can to experience different things internationally.
No, it's great because we've been asking the same question, and we seem to be getting similar answers. I mean, not with the same way, but in this like the exposure to the opportunities when you go abroad and study, even if it's a gap year, try something else. So just confront your own insecurities at the same
Yeah,
time.
yeah, I fully agree.
In a way, this sort of brings me to the third question because it's we want to talk about career outcomes and employability pressure. This again to do with the fact there is so much saturated
Mm.
employment market. It sort of reminds me of what happened back in 2007 and 8 when there was a financial crisis. There was saturated market plus financial crisis on top. Many universities focus on heavily helping students in the first job. You already mentioned that, right? The first job, but you work in helping people build sustainable careers. So what real skills do you think, or mindsets, which is much more difficult because setting a mindset, this is much more as a trade, right? But still, do you think universities should prioritize to help graduates thrive, not just get hired?
Yeah, no, I fully agree. I think things have got better. I think when I was at university, being your own boss was deemed as something you do if you can't get a job. I think the perception, rightly so, has changed, and now it's an exciting thing to be seen to be your own boss. The word entrepreneur, I doubt existed 20 years ago or 30 years ago. So it is definitely something that people aspire to now. I would still say that on a good side, universities now are doing more entrepreneurial courses, be it undergrad or postgrad, and that's a good thing. I would still question whether they're still too theoretical. I would still question whether they are, and I did a business degree, but I would still question they're just a business degree with a couple of entrepreneurial modules in it, and they kind of flower it up to be an entrepreneurial specialist program when really I don't think it is. I would question, if I had to be critical, how many of the lecturers have ever run a business themselves. So you can theoretically teach someone to run a business. You can read a business book and you can go through all the profit loss, identify your market and everything. But that doesn't mean you just come out and apply it and you're a successful entrepreneur. And I think the gap's I think it's a bigger gap there. So I think the universities are trying to get people into full-time jobs, which is great. And I think they're measured on that. But I think there still needs to be more of a light shone on, hey, if you don't want to work for a large company and you want to start your own business, we can help you there too. And that can be, I think, maybe having more vocational experiences as part of the syllabus. And I think that can also be done by the university, and some do already, but the university actually connecting more with the outside world of entrepreneurs and startups and exposing their students while they're studying to the world they might be going into. I think A very good example of this actually is this came from Finland, but there's a degree called Team Academy, which I believe 10 or so universities in the UK have adopted. And Aston University in Birmingham is one of them. I go and talk there sometimes. And they do a Team Academy degree, which is in essence a business degree, but whilst you're learning, you run a business as well. So at the end of that degree, you not only have a qualification, which is fantastic, but you've got a business that's up and running. So dare I say, as you learn marketing, you apply that marketing to that business you've started, and you do all of this as part of a degree. And I think that's amazing. I think if I'd love to have had that when I was a student. So not only learning about entrepreneurship, you're actually applying what you've learned in real time to build a business whilst you're on that course. And I think that's the future. I think that's really cool.
It's great because it sort of brings sort of apprenticeship programs, which we have sort of neglected for many, many years. We bring you up to speed, and in your university could have a similar approach, as you mentioned. Now, this sort of, it's difficult when you've got a set up curriculum to what to do, and at the same time introduce a practical tool. So, and on the same time, because we reaching that thing, the soft skills, right? You've been around people from all different walks of life, and the importance of traditional soft skills, something that you may have probably read or I've heard personally. Even the employers are hiring consultants to teach the employees to how to have soft skills. So like networking, right? Building relationships, or even just learning how to meet people face to face. What's your take on it?
I think it's a huge area, and I think this area has been unappreciated and, should we say, not covered, if that's the right term, forever, for years. So you would, if you go to a business degree or any kind of vocational business course, they will go through all the principles of business, be it finance, marketing, logistics, supply chain, whatever it may be. But there's nothing really on people. They will cover culture, and that's a very theoretical thing, applying principles, which isn't good. It's very good to have. But when you get to the basics, I still think it's untouched, and people go in very raw, and they're very shocked that they're some way behind. So, for example, yes, networking is a crucial skill that I think all ages can struggle with, because you have to go out there and be, to a certain extent, confident to talk to someone without a script. And I think that takes time, but it's crucial to do. I also think general ways of reading people needs to be kind of taught more in universities. So, for example, if you start a job and your boss sends you an email asking you to do something and you're a bit worried about can you do it or not, there's a skill in how you reply to that email or that text. And that takes a brain working in a different way. Like, well, I don't want to go back and say I don't know what I'm doing. I want to go back as if I do, but I've got to kind of get more. And that is a skill of how to word a reply or how to communicate digitally with someone. And it's something that's never taught, but it's something as you go through the working life, you get and you learn, it becomes second nature. But you don't know this at all when you first go into work. And I think that's something that I see a lot in graduates is they kind of have a very transactional approach, and they get an email through and they think, how do I reply to that? And I say, well, don't go back. You've got to think about how you come across and perception and what's the right way of managing expectations. That's never taught to the best of my knowledge in a university. Why a university doesn't do a course on interaction within a business and how would you reply to this and what does this mean and what do you read into this and how people read messages in different ways. I mean, that could be a bit of fun for a start, but I think that'd be invaluable. But that interaction skill is just not taught anywhere, I don't believe. And that's why students sometimes go in and can get in all sorts of trouble by the way they communicate with people, especially senior people, and it makes them look maybe not as professional as they want to be.
No, it's just how to come across, right? And it in a sense, it's I don't want to bring finishing schools, but in a way, it just sounds like bringing finishing school would be a good idea.
Well, maybe. I mean, I think there could just be a subject on company communications. Maybe it's a very dry title to give it, but it could be, here is a situation, you've received this from your boss and you do this job, how would you reply? And people have different goes, and then someone says, well, they could reply like this. So it's almost like a game almost to see where that answer leads you or could lead you and how you need to, protect yourself, manage expectations, all those things you don't get in a book. So I think the softer skills somehow need to be tackled sooner rather than later, because if not, you're going to be exposed very quickly to very tuned people in businesses who've been doing it for all their life, and they're going to throw you a message and you maybe don't read into it or you don't understand it, and you've got to get back to that person.
Because it's something that it is something, you're gonna eventually learn, but it may be too late for some. And
Yeah.
the earlier you're exposed to it, the better, because you can get, I suppose, build a bit more immunity to, even a criticism, because this is
Yeah.
something I found a lot.
Absolutely right. Or just stop and think. I mean, the reaction sometimes is to get back straight away, but just stop and think. And silence is powerful sometimes. All these little things that it does sound quite simple, but it just takes a bit. I think you can teach that in a fun way. So I think the softer skills, to your point, Maciek, are crucial, but they're almost, I think, felt by universities that people have them already. And let's teach the principles in the academic side, and then the softer skills is kind of down to you. You'll be fine. And I think, well, people may not be fine. They may have certain skills they need to, learn or improve. Tackle them earlier rather than later. And because it's quite a brutal place out there in the workplace, whether you work for someone or you work for yourself. And you've got to have some tools in your armory to protect yourself.
It is, and sort of, I want to skip a challenge here, because it's a great segue, because I've spoken to many entrepreneurs, employers, and university students, and we're in bridging that gap in education, and the pandemic, the post-pandemic world, just brings on the sort of shift in how the young professionals value, the work and what they want to do, the freedoms, the purpose, the work between the balance between work and personal life, right? And do you think universities are adapting quickly now to the mindset? Because it has definitely changed.
Yeah, it's definitely changed. I think, to your point, I think younger people now want more from work, but in a different way. So they want, when I first graduated, you had jobs for life, and the longer you worked somewhere, the better it was. And I don't think that necessarily is that great either. So nowadays, younger people have more choice and more requirements, to do with well-being, to do with purpose. And that's really, really good. And I think universities, I'm sure most of them adapt very well to that. I mean, they've got a responsibility for their students now more than they've ever had before in terms of well-being. And I think employers are adapting to that. I think the only thing I would say, which maybe is going the other way, and I'm slightly controversial maybe saying this, is I don't know if universities now have maybe gone too far themselves, and whereas a lot of courses now seem to be more online than face-to-face. So the days of being in on a course 2 or 3 days, 4 days a week on campus seem to be now being replaced by Zoom calls. And you still go in now and then, but it's more done online. And I think there's benefits to that. But I do also think, going back to the softer skills, that in my opinion, going to university isn't just getting a qualification and learning skills. It's about being part of a community and being part of a group and feeling part of a bigger thing and being part of a bigger city and all this kind of thing, wherever you go. And going into that lecture hall, meeting in the canteen and having social skills and interactions, working in groups face to face, they're the kind of things I think that really can help you prepare for a world in employment or self-employment. But if you take that away from people, then students are maybe doing everything from home, or they're a room at home. Yes, you're learning the skills, but I just wonder if that's a hindrance as well, that you're not getting that face-to-face exposure. Now, I agree with a hybrid approach. Everything should be face-to-face. It doesn't need to be now, but I think it can go too far the other way, where a completely online course with a couple of visits on the campus, I don't think is a good thing either. So if I had to be critical, I would argue a lot of universities have almost gone the other way, and they themselves are becoming online for whatever reason. And I think students may suffer a bit for that. My own opinion. I might be wrong.
It's something I'm sure that many universities, and we'll be talking to many, and I'm sure they would agree with you, and in a way that at other schools I agree with you, that the interaction, personal interaction, when actually you just see the students paying attention to you,
Yeah,
it's one of those important.
I think there's also that bit of, I mean, when you go to work, like nowadays, people will work 2 or 3 days in an office, maybe, and the rest at home or whatever it may be. You still have to mix with people. And it doesn't mean you have to be an extrovert, but you just got to be able to get on with people at a level that's right for you. And that's fine, at a way that's right for you. But if you don't get that at university, and it becomes very much an academic virtual experience where you learn things, you sit exams and whatever, and then you pass and you go out into the real world, I think that bridge we talked about at the start has got bigger from the academic world to the real world. And I just think there's a lot of softer skills you pick up at university, directly or indirectly, that I think help you towards the work life. And part of that is just being in the university or the college or wherever it may be, and feeling part of a bigger group, because life can get a bit lonely sometimes, and it's nice to say I'm going to pop into campus and meet people, or go to go to a club in the evening, as in a university club or something. That can be incredibly good for someone's well-being and everything, rather than maybe sitting in a room worrying they're not doing so well, not being exposed to things, and maybe not in such a good place. I think it's quite good for both sides to meet lecturers and students. I'm being extreme to prove a point, but I think that face-to-face thing is really important, even though definitely things have changed since COVID. And I think the hybrid way is perfect, but it can go too far either way, maybe.
Yes, and we've seen that. I mean, again, this is something this is outside the scope of this podcast, but something we've observed across the secondary school education, where I personally spoke with a lot of teachers who said we suffered a lot during those years, and with the softer skills, I mean, how are you going to develop over the Zoom / Google Meet / how are you going to develop those skills when you can actually see the interaction with them? You just see the avatar of the other person. Really, it's really difficult. So this is sort of brings me to the next question, which is I know this could be quite a broad spectrum, but finding global partners. If you could design yourself, imagine yourself in this sort of a position of you could actually design a partnership between universities and the kind of entrepreneurial ecosystems because you're working with, and now you champion, of course. How could educators better expose students to realities of building something from scratch? And of course, you already touched on some of the things, but perhaps if you could do a sort of a utopian way of, if you could do it, what would you do?
I don't think it's utopian. I think there's some simple things straight away that a university can do. I think universities should, as part of their course, take students out of the university building, take them into the ecosystem near them. So whether it be London, Berlin, or whatever it was, wherever the universities are, and go to, maybe there is an accelerator where startups are building businesses. Go along and see them and see what they're doing as part of the course. They have demo days where at the end of the accelerator, the startups pitch to investors. I think it's great exposure for any student, business or entrepreneurial student, to go and see people actually pitch their business to investors, a bit like a Dragon's Den, but live.
Yeah, yes.
It is not difficult to reach out to these institutions or ecosystems and say, I've got 10 entrepreneurship students, or I've got a business course, I want to bring some students. Can we come along and you can give us a talk on your accelerator, or can we come along and see your demo day? Or if there's a panel describing the future of entrepreneurism in Europe, take some students to that. It takes a little bit of effort, but I don't think it needs too much rigor or structure. It's taking, dare I say, people out of the building, the university building or college or whatever it may be, and seeing the other world, and then coming back and then discussing it. I think that is the first step that needs to be taken. Yes, you can have more longer term partnerships, more structure to them, but I don't think it's that difficult to actually reach out and go to these places and say, we are a university, we'd like to come along, we've got some entrepreneurs who would like to know what you do. I mean, the accelerator might think, well, we've got some future people here who might want to work as part of our accelerator, or might want to help some of our small businesses. Both sides benefit, but I just feel there is a tendency sometimes at universities to keep to the curriculum, and let's just keep to it and just keep doing the same every year. But the entrepreneur or the business person who wants to run their own business or whatever needs to cross the bridge and see the other world and still come back. But it's not difficult to go out there. The universities need to, I think, reach out and say, "Can we come along?" The other thing I would suggest, sorry, Maciek, is there's a good colleague of mine, a guy called Paddy Willis, who actually has a tool which enables students and parts of groups to run a business online, a simulation tool. Now, he actually comes into the universities and the schools, and he will sit them down in groups, say groups of 5, and each group will run a virtual coffee shop, and there will be things coming up like the price of coffee's gone up, or there's a leak in the shop. What do you do? And each of the groups decide what to do, and at the end of it, they get told whether they made a profit or loss. It's a bit of fun, but I think that's a massive exposure to what it's like running a business, but virtually on modern day technology, a simulator. That is another thing I would suggest universities do. Actually bring some new tech into their syllabus, as well as going out, bringing some new tech in And people like Paddy, who run a business successfully, actually helping students understand these problems that entrepreneurs have in a kind of a real-time situation. That's another thing universities do. There's people out there who would love to come in and add a bit, enhance the syllabus. So I think there's lots of things. I don't think these are big steps. These aren't multi-million decisions. These are quite simple things.
Administratively, there are big steps. It probably are not, but it is something that we've encountered with conversations in sort of that. It's sort of an invisible wall, right? Because we talk about the exposure, right? The purpose of university is prepare you for the world, but if you just try to prepare you for the job you might have, and the world changes as we speak, right? I mean, things have been changing. It's interesting, the startups in London emerged out of the financial crisis back in 2008 because there were fewer jobs. So they just started it. And I'm not saying that I want a financial crisis to happen so there's more entrepreneurs, but there is like the necessity of it. In a way, as you mentioned, that the exposure, you mentioned international exposure to things, or maybe things you're not comfortable with. Our final question, or semi-final, it's nearly final question. It's about that, return on investment. This is something that, I remember one of my economics teachers told me, is that like, it's not like money, it's a capital investment. So your international experience in terms of employability, but might prepare someone to one day start with their own venture. Like, would it help, in your opinion, international exposure?
I think if you park the getting a job as a return on investment, because hopefully it will improve you getting a job, I actually think it benefits you in lots of softer ways as well. And I mentioned it before. I think if you've got international exposure, whether you like it or not, you've got a different view of the world. I think you've had to deal with different cultures, different people, different diverse situations, and at whatever level you've had to adapt to that. So adaptability, you are a more adaptable person than you maybe realise. You have got more of a bigger view, more empathetical skills, if that's the right word, than you realise. And I think that works really well for one, employment, but two, I think just general living and meeting people. If you've got a broader view of the world and you've got different exposures, I actually think it gives you more creativity, more innovative thoughts. And also, most importantly, I would argue that you actually are much more engaging when you talk to people and understanding people's viewpoints, because you've seen lots of different viewpoints, experienced lots of different angles on things. I think if you use that correctly, I think that gives you lots of really good interpersonal skills and softer skills that will not only help you get a job and hopefully progress within a career, but just generally mixing with people and groups. I just think that's really good as well. So I would say, yes, get that experience, get the international experience if you can, because I think it put you in good stead in lots of different ways, as much as just getting a job. So I think it's got lots of benefits, some of which won't be obvious, but over time you'll appreciate.
This is a great insight because 20 years ago you would not know that unless someone at least suggested it. And of course, our 20-year ourselves tend to be slightly different characters anyway.
I think the other thing, Maciek, that people don't realise is that this whole network thing, when you work abroad or you live abroad and you've got this international perspective, without realising it, you are building up your own network. And a network is the hardest thing to get. You can't just buy one. You can buy a list of people. It doesn't mean they're going to get back to you or help you. It takes time to build a network, and that's crucial. By having that international exposure, you have got connections on an international scale, whatever they are, and whatever people do, that other people may not have. And I'm not saying you use that from day one, but the more you travel, the more people you meet, that network you get is absolutely invaluable. You may be in a position one day where someone says, oh, I'd love to know someone who is in the German market there. And you say, well, I don't know someone in that market in Germany, but I know someone who is in Berlin and might know someone. Let me ask them. That is an absolutely invaluable connection and support to be able to offer someone. So appreciate the people you know, because I'm not saying you want to use and abuse them. You don't. Networking is not about that. But we forget who we talk to, and we forget the value of actually keep those relationships going when you move on, because people like helping people, and your network is the hardest thing to build. People who've got international exposure are building a network on an international scale, and that to me is invaluable.
No, this is great because we're also, one of the conversations we've been having is about how much AI is going to replace a lot of the the sort of low entry jobs. And one thing they can't replace yet, because it's not intelligent, by the way, it's artificial. It's the fact that the interaction with people and making those connections that you had mentioned, like this is something skill that one can develop over time.
Yeah,
It could be very
absolutely.
beneficial.
And not covered, dare I say, I'd imagine not covered in any chapter on any business book.
No. So this would be great. And again, we'll challenge them. This is perfect segue, because I mean, I have another question to you, but I'm gonna sort of skip it to the question. The question is from our fellow entrepreneur Sam Hall. So I'm gonna leave it for a second, just an aside. But the question, because we're onto it, it's like ask the university question, right? Do you have a question? Our next guest is going to be from university. Imagine them to be the head of the faculty. On that topic we just discussed, ask them the question.
And they are, and this is a question, and they're head of
This
what
is
faculty?
anything you want to ask them. It could be as controversial as you feel like it, or as least controversial. Just ask them the question. Something you may have, thought of already.
Okay, I would ask them, how are you future-proofing your educational, how are you future-proofing your business-related courses? And what I mean by that is the days of just covering finance, marketing, logistics, personnel, HR, whatever, you still need that. But we're talking about softer skills. We're talking about AI. We're talking about technology changing, the world changing. How are you future-proofing your business program for students? So when they leave your institution, they are in the best place they can be to actually start their own business or get a job and have an appreciation of what's coming up.
Thank you. This is great. We're compiling all of those questions, and we have a array of them already ready. So, and our final question, which should be a pre-ultimate, but the question is from Sam Hall, who, as an employer, what's one red flag you notice in a potential candidate?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I would punctuality. And people who know me will
Really?
not, yeah. So if I'm a bit of a stickler for timing,
Mm.
so I've worked with hundreds of founders pitching to hundreds of corporate people to get work. And the one thing that lets them down when they should get that work is punctuality. And that's not just turning up on time. That is, if you've got 15 minutes to present something and 15 minutes needs to be left for questions, if you over pitch and you have no time for questions, that loses people that opportunity. So just stick to timing, respect the other person. So if I'm interviewing someone and they are late, or there's a certain structure to the interview and they're kind of not following it, then that's a red flag to me. Because I think, okay, that's, if someone's late, I actually be very blunt. If someone's late for an interview, unless they've got a really, really good reason, they're not going to get the job, full stop. Because my view is, if they're late for this interview, in my view, they could be late for a meeting, they could be late for a deadline, and then it comes on me if I'm an employer to take the flak for it. So I would say it's a simple thing, but I think it's lacking still is punctuality.
It's just great because it links to the things already discussed, which is the soft skills. Punctuality is something, I suppose university can teach it, but it's something that people can be at least aware of.
Well, when I was at university, we had a lecturer who was very, very, very strict on punctuality. And if you were late, I'm not saying he would make an example of you, but, everyone know you're late because you come in and he'd make a remark about it. And I think, that taught me quite a lot because it doesn't take a lot to be punctual and it doesn't look good. But the thing is, being very British, people don't say anything. So you could be late for an interview. It could go really well. And at the end of it, the person interviewing will say, "Thank you very much. That's fantastic. Really good meeting you. Very impressive." But most of them be thinking, "I'm not going to give you the job because you were late and that's it." And you go away
They're just
thinking,
passive aggressive about it, yeah.
yeah. And if you don't get the job, you put it down to I was unlucky. You don't never put it down to you were late because the feedback will never be you were late or the feedback will never be you never what we wanted. It's just
And
so,
they would never know, right?
you'll never know. So I have lots of conversations with founders and I say, look, you didn't get that, I think, because I got the feedback from the client, the corporate. You didn't get it because you weren't on time or you overspoke or you didn't keep to the format. Just punctuality and keeping to what structure is.
That's great. This is, again, thank you, because we bring again a list of things, and there seems to be common threads on many of them. But I'm really happy for your conversation. Again, thank you very much for joining us, Ken Valledy. This was a in southern London, the exchange knowledge. We're trying to, bring in the bridge the gap between education and the real world, entrepreneurial world. From corporate innovation to startup grit, there's something about learning those skills at universities, and Ken is helping his coaching. If you're a student, educator, or employer, we hope this conversation gave you some new ideas about to bridge that gap. And we'll see you next time. Thank you, Ken. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.